আমার নাম সীমা, আমার বয়স এই 23 বছর। আমি ঢাকা আসছি তখন আমার বয়স ছিল 12 বছর।
Almost 4 million of these workers are here in Bangladesh, working in almost 5,000 factories, making clothing for major Western brands. Over 85% of these workers are women, and with a minimum wage of less than $3 a day, they are among the lowest paid garment workers in the world.
কারণ আমি ঢাকা আসছি, আইসা আমার খালার কাছে থেকে আমি চাকরি করি গার্মেন্টসে। যখন আমি গার্মেন্টস চাকরি নিয়েছি তখন 700 টাকা বেতনে গার্মেন্টসের চাকরি নিয়েছি। তারপরে আমাদের এই অফিসে ইউনিয়ন করছি, এই ইউনিয়নের পর থেকে আমি প্রেসিডেন্ট পোস্টে আছি। তখনই স্যারের সাথে মানে দাবিনামাটা জমাও দেওয়া হয়েছে, স্যারেরা রিসিভও করছে। রিসিভ করার পরে স্যারের সাথে একটু কথা কাটাকাটি হয়, কথা কাটাকাটিতে হওয়ার পরবর্তীতে তারা দরজা লক করে 30-40 জন স্টাফ এবং স্যারেরা মিলে আমাদের উপরে এরকম আক্রমণ করে, অনেক মারধর করে। এবং সাথে চেয়ার ছিল, তারপর মনে করেন যে ওই লাঠি ছিল, স্কেল মিস্কেল ছিল, সিজার মিজার ছিল, ওইগুলো দিয়ে। এবং বেশিরভাগই আমাদের অত্যাচার করছে, তারা শুধু লাথি মারছে, ঘুষি মারছে এবং ওয়ালের সাথে মাথা বাইরে এসে বেশিরভাগই বুকে এবং তলপেটে এদিকে আমাদের অনেক আঘাত করছে স্টাফরা মিলা।
It's estimated that 1 in every 6 people alive in the world today work in some part of the global fashion industry, making it the most labor-dependent industry on Earth. Most of this work is done by people, like Shima, who have no voice in the larger supply chain. But to fully understand the impact that fashion is having on our world, we have to go back to where it all begins.
My grandparents settled out here in the 20s. And so this is a part of my heritage. People ask why I'm an organic cotton farmer. It's because I don't know any better. My granddaddy was an old German farmer that felt like we should respect the land, we're stewards of the land, and respect the life.
So you maybe can't make clothes that are climate neutral or climate positive, but you can certainly make clothes that have an absolute minimum impact on climate change.
Cotton produces the fiber that's responsible for most of the clothing worn by the world today. And as our appetite for fashion grows, the cotton plant itself is being re-engineered to keep up.
There's been this big drive towards the industrialization of agriculture, the intensification of agriculture. So instead of the old forms of farming, which were very much in tune with nature, they were linked to the cycles of the natural year and the seasons, what you see now is an intensification where the land is almost reconsidered as if it was a factory.
What you've created is this general practice of we treat millions of acres the same. We put a dose of chemical on it all, and that's when you get these big ecological effects that nobody has a grasp of what's really happening. Nature tends to heal itself in small pockets, but when you get this big, broad approach, we really don't know what's going on.
For us, it's not reducing the amount of pesticides and chemicals that are going on the cotton. That's one of the big sales. It reduces that. Not in our area where we are spraying millions and millions of acres and dollars of Roundup across the entire South Plains. What kind of impact is that having on our soil with residuals that are left at the microbacterial level? What kind of impact is that having on the people in our communities? Where's the cost on that?
The clothing industry has grown heavily reliant on precious natural resources, be it cotton picked from gigantic fields in India or nylon derived from petroleum products. Once the fabric has been manufactured, cut, sewed, and finished into ready-to-wear clothing, most of its leftovers are simply disposed of, creating a chain of waste in each step of the process. So much that in the years between 2000 and 2010, our consumption of textiles increased a staggering 47%. But while new styles at low prices are abundant, this relentless production and consumption is accused of having a much higher cost on the environment.
Bt cotton is a cotton in which a gene has been added from a bacteria to produce a toxin. But the Bt cotton, which is supposed to control a pest, has been offered because it's a way for companies to own the seed.
By patenting these genetically modified plants, Monsanto has become the largest seed and chemical corporation in history. Dr. Pritpal Singh has been studying the effects of these chemicals on human health, and his reports show a dramatic rise in the number of birth defects, cancers, and mental illness here in the region.
You can go in every village, you will see that hundreds of patients are suffering with cancers. 70 to 80 kids in every village you will find them facing the severe mental retardation and physical. Companies, fertilizer, pesticides, they are totally refusing the after effect of the pesticide and fertilizer. And this is the, you can say, classical symptoms of the toxicity. In one village, there is 60 mentally-retarded kids like this boy. So it will be very dangerous phenomena in the Punjab. And pupils, farmers, and labor. There is small farmers and maximum the labor means, so they can't afford now treatment. Ultimately, they have accept to the death of their kids, and they are waiting the death of their kids. Mother is waiting for the death of this boy.
Companies that make the GM seeds and make the chemicals are the same companies. And they're also the same companies that make the medicines, which they are not patenting. So you get cancer, there are more profits. For them, it's a win, 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 win. As for nature and people, it's a lose, 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 lose.
There's an article in Printers Ink, which is the leading advertising trade journal of its day, by a very famous copywriter named Ernest Elmo Calkins, a grand old man of the art of writing advertising copy. It was an article called Consumptionism.
You just have to look at landfill, and you can see in landfill that the amount of clothes and textiles being chucked away has been increasing steadily over the last 10 years as the sort of dirty shadow of the fast fashion industry.
As we get sort of closer and closer to species degradation, to trashing our last remaining pristine wilderness, we seem hell-bent on producing more and more disposable stuff. It makes no sense. Fashion should never and can never be thought of as a disposable product.
The average American throws away 82 pounds of textile waste each year, adding up to more than 11 million tons of textile waste from the US alone. Most of this waste is non-biodegradable, meaning it sits in landfills for 200 years or more while releasing harmful gases into the air. It turns out that only about 10% of the clothes that we donate actually get sold in local thrift stores. And as we're going through our clothing faster and faster, now more of it is being dumped into developing countries like Haiti. As the amount of secondhand clothing coming into Haiti has increased, the local clothing industry here has disappeared.
This river is being polluted and killed by the leather factories of Kanpur.
With growing demand for materials like cheap leather, Kanpur is now the leather export capital of India. Every day here, more than 50 million liters of toxic wastewater pour out of the local tanneries. Heavy chemicals used to treat the leather, like chromium-6, flow into local farming and even drinking water. In places like Kanpur, far from the eyes of the world, major Western brands are able to source cheap materials while avoiding all accountability for the growing cost to human health. Fashion today is the #2 most polluting industry on Earth, second only to the oil industry. The alarming thing is that not only is fashion using a huge amount of natural resources and creating staggering environmental impacts, these natural resources and this impact is often not even measured.
Shouldn't there be innovation that alters the entire concept of clothing?
এটা তৈরি করি কত কষ্ট করে আমরা এখানে এটা চাকরি করে এটা তৈরি করে বাংলাদেশে পারে এটা অবশ্যই তারা জানে না। তারা শুধু পায় আর পরে, কিন্তু এটা আমি মনে করি যে আমাদের রক্ত দিয়ে এটা তৈরি হয়। যেহেতু দেখা যায় অনেক অনেক সময় দেখা যায় গার্মেন্টসে চাকরি করতে যায় অনেক মেয়েগো জীবনও যায়। যেমন আমাদের এই কিছুদিন এক বছর আগে রানা প্লাজার ঘোষণা পড়ছে, আমাদের প্রচণ্ড শ্রমিক মারা গেছে। তাই আমি মনে করি এটা আমাদের অনেক কষ্টের পরিশ্রম। আমরা চাই না যে আমি চাই না যে বাইরের লোকও এরকম আমাদের রক্তের জিনিস তারা ব্যবহার করে। আমরা চাই যেন আমরা একটু গার্মেন্টসে উন্নত মালিক যেন আর একটু সতর্ক হয়। যেমন রানা প্লাজার ঘোষণা পড়ছে, আমি চাই না যে রানা প্লাজারের মালিকের মতো আর অন্য অন্য মালিক এরকম রিস্ক নিয়ে এবং এরকম বিল্ডিংয়ে ওয়ার্কারদের নিয়ে কাজ করে এবং আরও এরকম শ্রমিক মারা যায়, আরও অনেক মায়ের কোল খালি হয়। আমি এটা কোনো দিনও চাই না। আমি চাই আমাদের আর একটু মালিক সতর্ক হোক, এটাই যেন আমাদের একটু দেখে।
Fast fashion wants to produce fast. So the garment worker has to produce faster and cheap. So the garment worker is the only point of the supply chain where the margin are squeezed. And you have this huge, companies going to the factory in Bangladesh, place an order for 1.5 million jeans for, 30 cents each, 50 cents each. How can you make it ethical? I don't know. But also from the consumer point of view, is it really democratic to buy a t-shirt for $5, a pair of jeans for $20? Or are they taking us for a ride? Because they're making us believe that we are rich or wealthy because we can buy a lot. But in fact, they're making us poorer. And the only person who is becoming richer is the owner of the fast fashion brand.
Capitalism is the reason the fashion industry looks as it does today. It's the reason why workers in Bangladesh are paid so little, because if you're operating in a capitalist system, the main thing you have to do is create profit, and you have to create more profit than your competitors. And this is what drives companies to push wages down and down and down. Like companies don't go, like fashion retailers don't go to places like Bangladesh for any other reason except they can get the cheapest labour possible. Like there's no collective rights in Bangladesh, there's no trade union rights, there's a very, very low minimum wage, there's no maternity benefits, there's no pensions. That is why the fashion industry is in Bangladesh, because it can reap the biggest profits out of those people that are making the clothes for them.
I Moda rápida de bajo coste, que se usa muy poco y se desecha enseguida. Un modelo de negocio dirigido a los adolescentes.
Tener algo nuevo te sube el ánimo, da sensación de felicidad.
Consumo sin remordimientos.
Con la moda rápida, la industria textil ha hecho a toda una generación adicta a la moda.
Los clientes son ahora más críticos. El sector reacciona y promete reciclaje como solución, también para calmar la conciencia de los compradores.
La verdad es que quieren aparentar algo que no es cierto. El reciclaje de ropa para hacer ropa nueva es prácticamente inexistente.
Grandes cantidades de moda rápida acaban en países como Bulgaria y se convierten en un problema. Los restos van a parar a las estufas de la gente pobre.
No tenemos dinero para comprar leña.
Los tejidos quemados contaminan el aire.
Muchas de las prendas contienen una gran proporción de plásticos. Es el olor de la enfermedad.
¿Qué queda de la promesa de sostenibilidad de los fabricantes de moda rápida? Si antes había 4 colecciones al año, las cadenas de bajo coste como H&M, Zara y Primark ahora lanzan 52 microcolecciones. Cada semana una nueva. La venta de ropa nueva se ha duplicado desde el año 2000. A nivel global, se producen más de 120.000 millones de prendas al año. El mundo se ha hecho adicto a la ropa. Los alemanes compran 26 kilos de ropa al año por persona. La vida útil de los productos textiles es cada vez más corta. Por término medio, un top de fiesta se usa 1,7 veces antes de ser desechado. Alrededor del 40% de la ropa no se usa nunca, según un estudio de Greenpeace. ¿Cuánto tiempo te dura esa buena sensación de tener muchas cosas nuevas?
Para ser sincera, con una prenda como esta, un día. Es agradable cuando llega y la puedo ver, pero la sensación de felicidad no dura mucho más.
Pido ropa anunciada como sostenible en H&M y Zara y me encuentro con una terminología confusa. ¿Qué significa sostenible? ¿Qué significa reciclado? En la Universidad de Reutlingen visito a un experto en la industria textil que lleva años observando el sector. Le traigo las prendas desechadas del armario de Michelle. Kai Nebel, del Instituto de Textiles y Diseño, sabe mucho de ropa. ¿Se puede hacer algo nuevo con ropa reciclada?
Aquí tenemos una mezcla. Se trata de 2 tejidos diferentes. Eso se nota enseguida. Es poliamida y viscosa. Es una combinación difícil.
Alrededor del 70% de todos los textiles de nueva producción están hechos de fibras sintéticas. Se obtienen del petróleo crudo y son difíciles de reciclar. Cuando estoy en el comercio hablan de circularidad, entonces pienso que con mi ropa usada harán algo nuevo y bonito.
La verdad es que quieren aparentar algo que no es cierto. El reciclaje de ropa para hacer ropa nueva es prácticamente inexistente. Si hablamos de reciclaje, incluso cuando afirman que hay una parte reciclada, no indican de dónde proviene exactamente. Y esa prenda no proviene en un 99,9% de ropa usada. El reciclaje de ropa para hacer ropa nueva es prácticamente inexistente.
When it comes to sustainability, it's easy to place the blame on unethical brands and polluting factories in faraway lands. But to make the clothing industry anywhere near sustainable, the responsibility is not only with manufacturers, retailers, and brands. The responsibility is also with us, the consumers. Because as Rick pointed out earlier, while we need to buy less, we also need to care more for the clothing we...
In past generations, people would take care of their own products, their own clothes. They would fix them. They would sew patches on them. They would repair them if they're broken to get them.
Thinking about it or talking about an environmental problem, I think once you actually do something, once you actually sew something, once you actually fix something, it becomes a real tangible experience, and I think that that changes the way that you feel about it and the way that you interact with it. And suddenly this becomes a part of your skills and your learning and your persona that wouldn't be if you were to just buy a new jacket. Having this jacket be my unique jacket and having that be sort of the couture, I think we'll be in a much better place.
This more emotional connection to clothing, appropriately named slow fashion, has gained some momentum in the recent years, but it still has a long way to go. In the UK alone, people own roughly £30 billion worth of clothing that they haven't worn once in the past year. Buying less and caring for clothing is one part of the solution.
The reason why they're going into these big shops is because of the speed at which they want to switch up their fashion. Now, if the surface of their clothes is transformable, would they really need to do that?
We have two paths in front of us. One of those paths is to a future that is pretty grim. But the other road is towards a better future where we actually reverse those indicators and our planet gets healthier. And in our business, making clothes, we can do that by making the clothes with the least impact, with no unnecessary harm, and on the part of our customers who buy our clothes to take care of them, to fix them, to wear them out, to recycle them, to launder and clean them with the best practices possible.
It's very difficult to make people change their behavior. You know, a whole new generation have grown up going into Primark and H&M, buying things so cheaply that they don't have any understanding that it should be any other way, because that's all they've ever known.
The first economy on which our lives rest is nature's economy. Nature has an economy. That economy is huge. It's not counted. Then we have people's economy, women working, weavers working, farmers growing. And that was made invisible through this construct, first in the Depression and then during the war years, of the number called the GDP, the gross domestic product, which measures only that which is traded and has become a commodity.
A lot of the resources that we use to make our clothing are not accounted for in the cost of producing those clothes. So when it has water that's used to produce clothing, land that's used to grow the fiber, chemicals that are used to dye, those things all are inputs, and as inputs they cost something, and they also give outputs. In some cases good outputs, the clothing themselves, jobs, but in other cases bad outputs like harmful chemicals.
We will see a significant change over the next 10 years. Whether it's in time or not is another question.
You know, Martin Luther King Jr., at a speech in a Brooklyn church, he said that what America needed was a revolution of values. It needed to stop treating people like things. It needed to stop treating people in ways that were just about profit, but instead to treat people in a real and human way.
My God, we can do better than this. If what we want is to spread, as I would argue we do, spread industry around the world, not concentrated in one place, let the benefits be shared globally, then let's do that in an orderly, reasonable, careful way.
We need to recognize that capital is just money. Money is a means, and people should be accountable for how it's used. We need to celebrate the creative power of human beings. And we need to talk of creative work. We must stop talking about labor. We need to look at the land as not a commodity to be speculated on and traded, but as the very basis of our life as Mother Earth.
If you change all consumers into activists, all consumers asking ethical questions, all consumers asking quite simple questions about where their clothes are from, all consumers saying, I'm sorry, it's not acceptable for someone to die in the course of a working day. We can't just roll over and say, yes, have it, do what you like. It's too important, it's too significant an industry. It has too much impact and effect on millions of people worldwide and common resources.
Will we continue to search for happiness in the consumption of things? Will we be satisfied with a system that makes us feel rich while leaving our world so desperately poor? Will we continue to turn a blind eye to the lives of those behind our clothes? Or will this be a turning point, a new chapter in our story, when together we begin to make a real change, as we remember that everything we wear was touched by human hands? In the midst of all the challenges facing us today, for all the problems that feel bigger than us and beyond our control, maybe we could start here with clothing.